Good morning. We're going to kick off officially in about a minute or two here, but I wanted to ask the question or make a comment to folks and see a survey who knows answer to something. So we're giving away a free Kindle version of the book here, and you can download this or come to our booth if you want the physical hard copy, 204. So you can download the free Kindle copy, but you can only download it if you go to Amazon website, not the Amazon app on your mobile phone. Who knows why that is? Or for any Kindle book. So in the app stores for Apple App Store or the Google Play Store, these are marketplaces, and they charge a commission on the purchase of apps or content in-app purchases. So if people were buying Kindle books inside the Amazon app, 30%, sometimes 15% would have to go to Apple of everything that Amazon sold in their digital downloads. So marketplaces take a commission on things sold in their marketplace, both the initial purchase and ongoing purchases. So that's why if you want to download the Kindle version, even though it's free during NRF, you have to do that from Amazon website, not the Amazon app. It's a little curious marketplace fact there. So why don't we get started here? Thanks for joining us today for our discussion at NRF Big Show 2022 on marketplaces, how retailers can own the disruption by operating their own marketplace. So our agenda for today, going to kick off with introductions. Unfortunately, my co-presenter from Stripe, Zaki, was not able to join us due to the travel restrictions, but I'll be covering some of the types of points that he was going to make. So we'll do some quick introductions of myself and McFadyen, just one slide, not a commercial here, and then get into the real meat. Is like, what are the disruptions that are happening in retail? Then we'll talk about which retailers are transforming in this marketplace disruption. What are they doing? We'll talk about why they're so disruptive, some of the dynamics of the marketplace business model, what makes them so transformative, and how you as a retailer can disrupt with your own marketplace. So that's where we want to really get some good education here, the why and the how of what you can do to take action coming out of this session. So quick introduction, I said one slide about McFadyen Digital, a lot of content on this one slide, but just 4 things to know about McFadyen Digital. So we do a lot of big projects. We've worked with about 10% of the Fortune 500, worked on many sites that are billion-dollar GMV projects, some up to $10 billion a year of online e-commerce or marketplace sales, and pretty much every dimension of e-commerce or marketplaces that you can push the boundaries. We've pushed those boundaries in implementing projects. Second is we're very experienced doing this. So we've been in business doing digital solutions for 35 years, a third of a century, e-commerce for almost a quarter of a century, implementing hundreds of clients, generating tens of billions of dollars of GMV, and 15 years building marketplaces. In fact, we started building marketplaces before they were called marketplaces 15 years ago. And dozens of those clients cumulatively generate billions of dollars of gross merchandise value. We're a global company, a couple hundred marketplace experts around the US, India, and Brazil, operating globally for 2 decades. And we're also innovators and thought leaders in the space. So we publish content like this, the Amazon bestseller book, Marketplace Best Practices. We have a document on evaluating marketplace platform vendors, some marketplace maturity model content, and we'll provide some links to all that. It's all free for you. Great educational content. We're really one of the leaders in content for educational content around marketplaces. And we'll share some of that here and provide links for you to download a lot of that stuff if you want to read more about it later. So that was it about McFadyen. Into the real meat of the presentation. So we're going to talk about marketplaces versus traditional retail or traditional e-commerce. The examples that I'll show, the traditional retailers or e-commerce businesses will be in black, and the disruptors of the marketplaces will be in red. And we'll go through about half a dozen different slices of retail in the next graphs. So here we'll look at grocers. So we have 2 dimensions, plot some of the bigger grocers in the US. The horizontal axis shows the years in business, which for grocers ranges between 75 to 150 years for most of the bigger grocers. And the employee count's about 250,000 to 500,000 employees for most of these. The bubble size represents the market cap or valuation of those businesses, which range generally from 7 billion to 36 billion for the bigger brands in grocery. Well, 10 years ago, along came Instacart. And in about 10% of the time, with 5% of the staff, with no stores, they created a larger valuation than any of the other grocers that have been around for a century. They presented yesterday, mentioned they have 8 million SKUs available as well. A typical grocery store might have 30, 40,000 SKUs in a store. Let's look at another industry, lodging. So the big hotel chains, again, plotted with the years in business, which range from about 50 years to 100 years. On the horizontal axis, the employee count ranges from 100,000 to 300,000. And market caps, the size of the bubble, vary from 9 billion to 50 billion for Marriott, the biggest. 10 years ago, along came a marketplace disruptor, Airbnb. They have a larger market cap than all of the other hotel chains combined. $110 billion versus the biggest one, Marriott, is 50 billion. They also offer more rooms than all the other hotel chains combined. They offer 5 million rooms, whereas Marriott, for example, has a little over 1 million rooms. Again, they did this within 10% of the time, less than 5% of the staff, with no physical properties. CPG brands, the suppliers to a lot of the retailers. So here we plot out, again, the age on the horizontal axis between roughly 50 to 200 years, and the employee count between 50,000, 100,000, 150,000 employees. Along come these e-commerce aggregators, a new category, and within 4 years, Thrasio has acquired 200 brands and 10,000 products. And with just about 1% of the staff of these CPG brands. Now, they're not really disrupting the CPG brands, so Unilever and P&G are not losing huge volumes of market share yet to these guys. Brands are not created equal. So these are much smaller brands, but just think about this disruption. My forecast is there is disruption coming, so warning sign ahead. Thrasio raised $3.2 billion in the 4 years they've been around. This industry of e-commerce aggregators in 2021 raised $12 billion. So think about this, $1 billion a month going into acquiring brands to compete against the CPG brands. So the warning sign, disruption coming. We all know how Uber and Lyft have transformed the ground transportation business, but once you visualize the data, and this is receipts from Certify, how much rental cars and taxis have declined versus how much Uber and Lyft have increased in this 5-year period pre-COVID to 73% of all receipts, business receipts for transportation. Huge transformation. Again, a marketplace with no vehicles, no driver or employees, and within 5 years, totally disrupting an industry. Let's look at the general merchandise. So the department stores, which could have been a proxy for marketplaces over the past century or so, where it was one large retailer that had a lot of brands, a lot of inventory, a lot of SKU counts. They've been pretty much flat or declining on average, actually, for the past 5 years. If we look at the general merchandise marketplaces, Amazon, JD.com, Alibaba, overseas, and especially in China, these companies have grown on average 800% within 5 years. Most of them with no stores. Amazon, of course, is getting into some stores. B2B supplies, so industrial. Grainger, one of the biggest businesses here selling B2B industrial supplies. Amazon Business, which started 5 or 6 years ago, has grown 25 times the $1 billion that they started with. Now they do $25 billion, and they're forecast to do, by 2025, do $85 billion in B2B business. And this is just the B2B slice of Amazon. It's not including the total, roughly $500 billion total GMV of Amazon. Software sales. We talked a little bit at the beginning of this session about the app stores. So GameStop dropped revenue about by half over the last 5 years. Apple App Store, Google Play Store, marketplaces for software, grew 300% or tripled the revenue to a total of about $130 billion. And just to think about those numbers, when I mentioned having to pay 30% commission, and this is what caused the, if you remember the Epic Games Fortnite dispute with Apple and Google, they're paying 30% on roughly $1 billion of Fortnite sales. Sometimes 15%, it can be lower, but that's $300 million being paid to Apple or the marketplace operator. So highly profitable, and that's, we'll talk about the financial economics of these models. That's not $130 billion of revenue, the way revenue is calculated in a marketplace is actually the commission. So the commission is about, let's say 30% of that, 15 to 30%, or about $30 billion of revenue, which had almost zero cost for them to produce. Apple and Google are not producing that software that you're getting on the app stores. So there are a lot of other industries we could dig into here. I could spend the rest of the time talking about disruption in different industries. Another interesting one is art. And if you look at Christie's and Sotheby's, doing from 1 to 8 billion a year. NFTs in the last year, some of which is art, some of which is other assets, but that's grown to almost $20 billion versus Sotheby's and Christie's combined doing about $8 or $9 billion in 1 year, from 0 to $20 billion. Now, I question whether all these things selling for $40 million of a pixelated ape or something are really worth that, but that's where the industry is. And enough of the doom and gloom. Let's talk about the shiny, happy people who are actually transforming. So which retailers are transforming? So here at the big show over the last 2 days, we saw Chewy talk on the keynote about their marketplace for veterinary services. So they launched this just a few months ago. So it's a marketplace for services, not just a marketplace for physical goods. And there are lots of different types of marketplaces. You can sell physical goods, you can sell services like a vet or installing a ceiling fan that you buy on a marketplace. It can be digital goods. We've built out marketplaces for AI data sets. We're doing one for NFT marketplaces. Lots of different types of marketplaces and ways in which businesses can expand. GameStop, I mentioned, declining their physical sales, but they just launched an NFT marketplace themselves. Yesterday on this stage, Macy's presented with Miracle about their marketplace initiative. Yesterday, the CEO of Walmart presented. They have 90% of the products sold on the Walmart site are from marketplaces. They're doing a very healthy business, about 150,000, I think if I have the number right, 150,000 third-party sellers on the Walmart marketplace. So definitely growing fast, building out their own fulfillment services to compete with the FBA. And just an hour ago, if you were in this room, AB InBev, a CPG brand, presented with Vitex about their marketplace in Latin America for cold beer delivery through a chain of retailers. All right, so who else runs a marketplace today? So some of the biggest online retailers, 10 out of 10 of them operate marketplaces. A lot of these are global companies, so Alibaba, JD.com. If you think of these Chinese marketplaces doing much, much bigger than Amazon, couldn't even fit the Alibaba graph on this chart. So that's globally. In the US, 9 out of 10 of the biggest retailers, online retailers, operate marketplaces as well. Costco being the only one that's not doing it. And it's not just the big guys. A lot of the startups are operating marketplaces as well. So this is data from CB Insights. Of the biggest e-commerce and supply chain unicorns, meaning private companies valued over $1 billion, 8 out of 10, it's actually 9 out of 10, Fanatics is launching a NFT marketplace as well. So 9 out of 10 of the biggest e-commerce related marketplaces retailers operate marketplaces. So a lot of people think, oh, well, that's only Amazon and Walmart and the big guys can do that. Of course, those guys are doing over $1 billion of gross merchandise value on their marketplaces. But people don't know that there are dozens and dozens, 100 or so retailers operating marketplaces as well. So quite a few doing $500 million or more on their marketplace. That's just the marketplace gross merchandise value. $250,000 or more. Best Buy Canada is an interesting example. Their SVP of digital, I think his title is, recently said that they started out as a $4 billion online retailer that thought they'd try out a marketplace, to now they think of themselves as a marketplace that happens to be one of the sellers on that marketplace. They totally transformed their business model based on operating a marketplace for Best Buy Canada. And again, lots of them in the 100 million plus. And as you go downstream to the 10 million plus, this again gets over 100 different retailers operating marketplaces. So let's look at the different types of marketplaces out there. Of course, you know about the B2C. We talked about the Best Buys, Walmarts. And then there are B2B, pretty well known. Staples, Hewlett-Packard Enterprise operate B2B. And consumer to consumer, or P2P, peer-to-peer, we have a lot of sites like Etsy, Craigslist, TaskRabbit, where it's individuals providing services to other individuals. And C2B, not as many people are familiar with this, where consumers can sell their products or services to businesses. You have sites like Fiverr, Upwork, YouTube, where an individual, an influencer, or contributor can start getting revenue from businesses doing product unveilings, for example, on YouTube, or doing work for businesses on Upwork or Fiverr. But there are a lot of hybrids as well. So Amazon, we mentioned, is doing $25 billion now on B2B and about $500 billion on B2C. Newegg, a lot of these companies span different verticals. So Uber provides for individuals and for businesses. A lot of companies have contracts with Uber. Shutterstock, people can sell to individuals or sell to, or bigger companies that have large photo libraries can sell B2B as well on those. So lots of different business models around marketplaces. So that's kind of the which retailers are doing it and how they're doing it. Let's get into our section of why, kind of the fundamental economics and the business models that make marketplaces different than traditional retail or e-commerce. So let's look back about a century ago when one of the biggest disruptions in retail happened. And that's a similar size disruption is happening now with the marketplace model. So anybody know who was a big disruptor 100 years ago in retail? They were definitely, but I was thinking Piggly Wiggly. So before 100 years ago, in the physical retail, in store, people tended to go to the counter, and an employee would go back to the back room, pick up the goods, and bring it to the front. So they would fill the cart, employees would fill the cart for the consumer. So that was employees doing that work. Piggly Wiggly transformed the industry by having the first real self-serve marketplace. So employees would go through, it was a little bit gated and controlled, but they shifted that labor from employees to customers. And within 15 years, Piggly Wiggly went from having one store to 2,600 stores, really disrupting the retail industry. So that was a shift of labor from employees to customers. Marketplaces shift labor costs and other costs from the retailer to the suppliers. Let's look at that and what that means and how that business model works. So a traditional retail or e-commerce business is called a pipeline business. And this is part of there's a great book called The Platform Revolution, if you want to read a little bit more about this. Came out about 7-8 years ago. And it talks about platforms versus pipelines. So let me explain what a pipeline is. So traditional retail, you have to find your products, and those can come from distributors or directly from manufacturers. So there'll be a team that may source goods. They negotiate the contracts. Sometimes these contract negotiations can take weeks or months to do. We've seen some of our B2B companies, clients take 2 months to bring on new products. Load that into the ERP, merchandise those products, get the images, write the text, optimize it for SEO, set the price. So this is an important factor. The retailer sets the price. They hold the inventory physically and financially. So a retailer has to build out the fulfillment center, distribution center, and actually put out the cash, the capital to hold the inventory, financially hold the inventory, process the orders. This is typically a automated process, but we're still putting it in the pipeline of activities that has to happen. And then fulfill the orders, of course. So very sequential, labor-intensive, slow process to get money from the customer in the end. So that's a pipeline business. Let's now look at a platform business. So you have a much smaller team of people here, which is one of the elements that makes a marketplace so much more scalable. You have people that recruit sellers, people that support the sellers, and then the order processing, again, which is usually automated. So it's generally just two main categories of labor in your platform business. Part of what makes the marketplace business model so successful and scalable is that a network ecosystem of buyers and sellers. So that network effect grows exponentially. And you can think of like a telephone system. 2 people with 2 phones is not a whole lot of connections, it's 1 connection. If you start having 10 people with phones, you get a lot more, and then thousands and millions. It's an exponential growth with that network effect. Same customers on one side of the marketplace, but on the other side, the sellers, that's where that pipeline labor is distributed out to the sellers. So you'll have a third-party reseller that may be getting goods from a distributor, and they have to go through that sourcing, negotiating contracts, merchandising, storing, purchasing, storing, fulfilling. Some third-party resellers might source from multiple distributors. You might have multiple resellers, third-party resellers, that are sourcing goods from the same distributor. And what happens in these cases is those third-party sellers are competing on price. So a lot of times that will drive down the price of the good on the marketplace, part of that virtuous circle you've probably heard about, where customers get better prices from marketplaces. Of course, it may be, and distributors may start selling directly on the marketplace from multiple manufacturers, or manufacturers, CPG brands, may start selling directly onto the marketplace. So you really scale this, and it's not that same linear effect that you have with pipeline businesses. So you're really outsourcing all of that labor to the third-party sellers. So let's look at what that does to your business model. So typically in retail or e-commerce, if you double your SKU count, you may need to double your number of merchandisers. You may need to double your fulfillment center space. You may need to double your number of retail stores or square feet of store footprint. It's very linear and expensive to scale traditional retail. Versus the marketplace with that network effect, the flywheel effect, outsourcing a lot of that labor to third parties, it scales much more exponentially. And that's why we've seen so many of those marketplaces outstrip the market share, market cap of the traditional retailers so quickly. So let's analyze the evolution of marketplaces and how one evolves from one stage to the next. Traditional retail, been around for millennia. E-commerce has been around for about a quarter century, since the beginning of SSL. And again, we mentioned that whole pipeline of activities that has to happen. You source the goods, you manage the images, you merchandise them, you price them, handle the fulfillment, returns, customer support. All of that is the responsibility of the retailer or the e-commerce operator that's holding first-party goods. First-party means you own it, you're fulfilling it, you purchased it. Dropship is a incremental step above that. It outsources some of those pipeline activities. It outsources the fulfillment. Generally, it does not outsource price setting, merchandising, handling support. So it is a step on the way towards a marketplace. It's kind of like halfway there to a marketplace. But third-party marketplace, this is really when you platform a business. You outsource those activities of sourcing goods, loading products, images, merchandising, setting price, fulfillment, support, handling returns. The marketplace operator can still curate the categories, the products, the content, and so forth, but all that's outsourced. As you want to scale even further, it's important to get to the level 4 of this maturity model, which, much like the capability maturity model, CMM, CMMI for software developers in the room, is really metric-driven or quantitative management. So once you start getting hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of sellers, you need to automate how you manage them. So if they're slow to respond to queries, slow to ship, they reject orders, they get customer issues, you want to manage those in a quantitative, metric-driven, automated process. So that's important to the next level of scaling a business. And also getting some insights, having a nice dashboard that shows you some metrics and suggests these are great categories. We may want to shift our first-party inventory that is slow-moving, it's expensive, it's seasonal, to third-party sellers. Or vice versa, if you start seeing third-party sellers having a very successful product, fast-moving, high margin, maybe we'll bring that in, and that should be a one first-party good that we either sell digitally online or we keep it in our physical stores. And then optimizing is when you can bring in some new business models. For example, Chewy offering a marketplace for services. You can start selling experiences, promotions, retail media networks, so advertising on top of a marketplace. Once you have those eyeballs of so many people coming, so many data points. For any of those of you that were in the Instacart session yesterday, the amount of data that they have and that's a four-sided marketplace. If you look at that, that's again really an optimized marketplace. You have customers that are buying on the buy side. You have grocers that are supplying the goods. You have personal shoppers, the people doing delivery, and you have the CPG brands, all of which are paying. CPG brands are paying into the retail media network to advertise there, and they're selling the data back to them. They're making money from the delivery services, making money from the groceries, and making money from the customers. Four-sided marketplace. Most are just typically a two-sided, maybe a three-sided. So we have a lot more details about this. There's a good about 30-page white paper you can download, McFadyen.com/MMM, if you want to learn more about the marketplace maturity model. So let's talk about the economics. I mentioned how GMV and revenue and profit are calculated different in marketplaces versus retail business models. So in e-commerce, it's typically buy low, sell high. So the retail operator sets the price to the customer. They buy at a certain cost P from the customer, and you subtract those two and you get your gross margin. In a marketplace, the third-party seller generally sets the price. There's some cases where you don't want to do that, but usually the third-party seller sets the price. You charge a commission, which may vary by category, 15%, 20%, software it's often 30%. Low margin goods like electronics, it might be 5 to 10%. So you multiply that commission grid for the category times the value set, the price set by the seller, and that's where you get your gross margin. So in the both of these equations, the total GMV, gross merchandise value, that's why you hear that term GMV instead of revenue, is the top line of both of these equations. And the revenue for the retailer is the top line of the black equation, but the revenue for a marketplace operator is the M, the gross margin on the bottom of that equation. So you may see lower revenue numbers, but much, much higher profits from the marketplace operator than you'll see from a retailer. Much, much higher. So in the marketplace, it's help others sell and take a slice of the pie versus buy low and sell high. So what are some of the revenues and expenses that return on the investment in a marketplace? So the top line here are the things that you want to drive up. So fees, there are many ways in which you can monetize a marketplace. There can be commissions, I mentioned 10%, 15%, 30% commission charged on selling goods. Subscription fee, you pay $20 a month to list your goods on Amazon or whatever the rates are for the different marketplaces. You can have advertising fees, the second category there, where this can be featured products, search headlines, display ads. There are a dozen or more categories of advertising revenue potential. And others, it can be the data. The data insights are really invaluable. That's as the Instacart speaker said, data is the new currency for partnerships because they collect so much data. They have such valuable negotiating power with the four parties of the ecosystem they're in. Fulfillment, I mentioned Walmart's offering their own equivalent to FBA fulfilled by Amazon. Of course, there are expenses, capital expenses up front to launch a marketplace and keep it operating in the OpEx expense, the marketing. An important thing here is to realize that you are marketing now to two parties. You're not marketing to customers, just customers. You're marketing to sellers. So it's critical that to get that flywheel spinning, that you recruit enough sellers onto your marketplace. So this is not exact math. Obviously, it's not how you do a full P&L equation. So don't take this to your CFO and ask him to run this math. Everybody's probably seen the Amazon flywheel about spinning that wheel and getting better selection, better customer experience, better traffic, drives more sellers. And also you lower the cost structure and lower the prices. That's been around 20 years. Actually, Jeff Bezos got that from Jim Collins, the Good to Great author. We took that simple flywheel and made it a lot more confusing for you. So in our circle, we start with the more products. Obviously, you can add more products, more categories, adjacent categories, new categories. That will attract more customers because you're the source for that information. That you naturally have better SEO that can even drive down your costs for SEM, a bigger brand footprint, more mind share. Drives more sales, of course, when you have a bigger catalog, more to offer to your customers, better prices, meeting your customer expectations. You don't have that not found search result for your customers, which may drive a lot of traffic to your competitors. If third-party sellers can offer that for you. Of course, cross-sell, upsell, substitute sell for goods in your catalog. We mentioned that the business model of marketplaces is much more profitable. Again, for that roughly $30 billion of revenue out of the $130 billion that Apple and Google make on their app stores, that is almost no cost for them. $30 billion of revenue. They're not producing any of that software that's sold on the Google App Store or Apple App Store or Google Play Store. Of course, you build this momentum, you get more sellers that want to sell on your marketplace. And they start competing against each other. So I mentioned to win the buy box, sellers, meaning that if 5 sellers are selling a product, the add to cart buy box is generally whoever has the lowest price. Maybe price, shipping, inventory availability, time to ship, a number of different categories that can drive that. You get that data, which is immensely valuable to optimize your business or even monetize it as a revenue source for you. If you're an omni-channel retailer, you can optimize your store assortment based on the data you're collecting from third-party sellers in terms of what are fast-moving goods. Generally, the third-party sellers identify, sell, and fulfill new products much faster than retailers traditionally do. And of course, this can drive more store traffic for you. Even for companies that don't operate their own marketplace, you've probably heard that Kohl's accepts Amazon returns and other partnerships with Amazon. You could buy Amazon TVs at Best Buy. So a lot of these partnerships are happening now where marketplaces are helping drive traffic into stores. So that was the why, the dynamics of why marketplaces are so disruptive. Now we're going to talk about the how, which can become a long topic, but we'll get into this at a high level. So generally, we have another a methodology called MES, Marketplace Enablement Steps, which we're happy to share some information about that as well in more detail. But in the big picture here, we're going to look at the top row here is going to be the business and strategy activities that have to happen along different phases. So assessment and planning, getting to minimum viable product launch, full deployment with a kind of a fast follow, and then ongoing operations. So in the strategy and the decision-making activities that have to happen, at the beginning, there's a lot of competitive analysis, budgeting for this. Looking at the success criteria and KPIs is an important aspect. We actually have a pretty good white paper on this that identifies 20 KPIs for marketplaces. We're happy to share with you that as well, share that with you. Because it's very different than an e-commerce business. Looking at a roadmap of what you want to do, how many sellers do you want to onboard at what time frame? How many third-party products, how many third-party SKUs, what type of third-party GMV are you targeting is reasonable to expect in year 1, year 2, year 3, et cetera. Organizational design, I mentioned different roles of people that you have in your company. If you're a traditional retailer, you probably don't have third-party seller recruiters or third-party seller support people. These are new categories. Oftentimes, the existing merchandisers can transition into some of those roles, but there's different organizational design needed, tech stack selection. That's an important element I'll talk about in a bit about which marketplace platform do you want to use? Which payment processor do you want to use? Because those are very different in the marketplace business model. We'll talk about in a second too. Business prep, so again, what are the categories you want to expand in? What are some that you may want to transition from 1P to 3P, or how are you going to curate those? Defining the terms and conditions. Remember, one layer of that platform business model was the T's and C's that apply to all sellers. It may have some variability in there, so you may have a commission grid which says these categories 10%, these categories 20% commission. And if you're a featured seller by getting above 4.5 stars, you get 1% less commission rate. Designing that and the terms and conditions, that's standard across all the sellers, unlike negotiating a contract with every vendor that you onboard in a first-party process, which again, negotiating those contracts may take weeks or months sometimes. But you define one-time upfront terms and conditions which apply to all sellers. Some different marketing, again, marketing to the sellers, figuring out some of the shipping grids and changes to the user experience as well, which is going to be different as you list multiple sellers on your multiple options for one good. It's maybe different prices from different sellers, may have different shipment times for different sellers, different inventory levels from different sellers, different shipping costs from different sellers. So the UX that you flow through varies a little bit. And then once you're live, there's the ongoing business operations of continuing to recruit and onboard and support sellers. Looking at the support, again, you have to provide support on both sides of the marketplace, the customers and the sellers, especially to scale to hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of sellers. The ongoing curation process. Which categories do you want to expand into? Which products within those categories? What type of pricing, if you're going to have any pricing rules like MAP compliance, minimum advertised pricing, and so forth. QA of that, third-party good. Performance management, this is a very important aspect because, and I'll talk about this in a second too, how you can optimize your marketplace with all that data. You get a lot of data, it's important to leverage it to improve your business. Taxonomy is an important aspect as well. You have your data structure and your attributes and your value pairs for your inventory, your goods that you sell. If you have hundreds, thousands of third-party sellers, they have their own category structure, they have their own attributes, they have their own definitions. It may be burgundy or dark red on different, for colors, for example, from different sellers. You have to harmonize that data coming in from different sellers, the categories and so forth. Some integrations into some sellers. We'll talk about ways of doing that. And then ongoing enhancements to this, improving your SEO and seller automation. You can add additional seller automation activities. Some of the business intelligence that helps drive that level 4 of the marketplace maturity model, where you have quantitative management of your system. And then traditional ongoing operations, sometimes outsourcing some of the activities in the BPO model. So this is the MES methodology. That's the process. Let's look at the technology stack. I promise this won't get too technical. I'll try to minimize any buzzwords here, but let's look at the architecture, technology architecture of a marketplace. So of course, again, I'm going to use the black for traditional e-commerce or retail and use red for the marketplace side. So, commerce has, catalog, cart, checkout, traditional things we've seen for a quarter century. You have payment and tax, both of which are different, very different in a marketplace model. And you'll have generally an admin console, some management tooling for managing the e-commerce platform for first-party catalog merchandising, promotions, and this can be sliced and diced into different, maybe you have a third-party CMS, third-party PIM, et cetera. Let's look at the marketplace side now. So you have, much like in e-commerce, you're going to have a operator console where you can manage the third-party sellers, do that curation of new categories, new products. Look at the third-party order status, the shipping, setting up, configuring shipping and other reports. But now we'll go through the actual data flow of what the elements are inside of that marketplace platform. So in front of the vendors or sellers, the third-party sellers, you can have a graphical user interface at the bottom. You can have a graphical user interface like a web portal, which smaller, less sophisticated third-party sellers will usually go in there and upload their catalog. You can have an API, which more sophisticated third-party sellers will use. They may be using Shopify or Magento or BigCommerce, and there may be integrations into that platform. Or you can use a VAN, a vendor aggregation network. Like Channel Advisor is a very popular VAN, vendor aggregation network, which can bring to you thousands or tens of thousands of sellers with goods that automate that integration into your marketplace, but they charge a commission for that, a slice of the action. So now let's talk about the data flow, the process flow. So first thing, a seller gets onboarded, you upload some vendor information about them. They may have their own store-in-store content. Then I mentioned the data harmonization. You need to map their catalog, their hierarchy, their attributes into your catalog. You upload offers. So offers are different than products. Think of product information as slow-moving. If it's an iPhone case for the iPhone 13, that may be the same product, same information for a couple of years. The offer information is the price, which in competitive pricing, that may change monthly, weekly, daily, hourly sometimes to get 1 penny below the other person and the other seller and get the buy box. Inventory changes quickly. Shipping costs, shipping times may change as well. So offer information changes very quickly. And you have to have a platform that's going to be able to manage that. If you have 10,000 sellers with 250,000 products, and those are changing on a daily basis, you can imagine the volume of data that has to be processed to update the marketplace with that. So as the customer goes through their, looking at the sellers, looking at the catalog, searching, adding to cart, you want to confirm the information that with the seller before actually doing the checkout, get the shipping time, shipping costs, and so forth. The seller has to accept that order, confirm that, because it may not always be real-time information for the third-party seller. You connect in with the payment systems, and this is where our Stripe, who we recommend as the ideal payment platform, can do a lot of different things which are very unique to marketplaces. There's a lot of KYC, AML, MOR activities, which is the whole acronym soup. We have a whole 1-hour webinar about that acronym soup of that area, which is merchant of record, know your customer, anti-money laundering, making sure that the seller you're sending money to is not a drug dealer or a terrorist organization. So a lot of unique things there. We've had some big retailers, Fortune 100 retailers that have, well, we want to stick with our current payment processor because we use it at thousands of stores. Well, those payment processors a lot of times don't work very well in the marketplace model. They don't want to take that liability for KYC or AML, et cetera. Tax nexus is different. So nexus is calculated based on where the seller is and where the customer is, not where the retail operator is. So you have 1,000 sellers in different states and counties and so forth. Different taxes will apply there. Order status goes back to through the marketplace. And then payment back to the sellers. That can happen in the marketplace or through the payment processor like Stripe. And then there's some other activities like customer service. You have to have a messaging platform which will typically anonymize the customer information to the seller. Performance management of how well sellers are doing as you want to scale. And reporting. So I'm getting towards the end of my time here, so I'm going to move through this a little bit faster. So a lot of people ask, which platform should I use? We see a few of the marketplace platform vendors here at the show. So again, using that marketplace maturity model from first-party e-commerce to third-party and onto the higher levels of sophistication. You have some pure-play marketplace players. I mentioned yesterday, Miracle was presenting on this stage with Macy's. They would fall in that area. You have traditional e-commerce platforms that do not do third-party. So your Shopify's, BigCommerce, Salesforce Commerce Cloud, Hybris, et cetera, that do not do commerce. They do first-party and dropship. And then you have some full-stack providers. I mentioned VTEX was on stage here an hour ago. They're a good full-stack provider where they provide commerce or first-party, they provide dropship, and they provide marketplace capabilities. Generally not as strong of capabilities as the pure-play marketplace companies who focus exclusively on marketplace. Kind of the compromise there. And then different platforms scale to different levels. So are you going to do 10 million of GMV and you have a $100,000 budget? There are certain marketplace platforms that are a good fit there. Or are you planning to do $1 billion of GMV and you have a couple $1 million of budget to onboard a million SKUs and 5,000 sellers? So different scales. So we have this other report here. Again, you can grab a copy of this at our booth or download it from our website, Marketplace Sweet Spot. We also have a 1-hour video recorded video where we walk through this whole process, explaining the fit of these different vendors. It's called the sweet spot because there's not one that's best, one that's worst. Different vendors fit in different categories better. Like I mentioned, if you wanted to have a combined first party and third party in one platform. I think this is my last slide. I mentioned performance management. So in this example of a marketplace being a two-sided engine, you have sellers and you have buyers. And there's a dashboard of metrics that you can look at. And again, these are very different than the dashboards for e-commerce. We actually built out a marketplace performance management dashboard, which looked at some of these unique metrics to marketplaces. And there are levers that you can pull on the seller side. So you can change your ad rate. How much are you charging for ads? How much is your commission? Is it 10% or 15%? What is Walmart and what are Amazon? What are other niche marketplaces charging their sellers? How strict are you on curation? Some companies want to be very, very, very strict. Some are more wide open, like in eBay, where almost anything can be sold. How much are you going to invest into recruiting sellers? And then on the buyer-facing side, your customer side, of course, a lot of these are also traditional with e-commerce, but what's your SEM spend? How much are you investing into marketing? How much have you optimized your user experience to really highlight the marketplace benefits? Are you offering creative payment benefits and so forth to the buyer side of the equation? So that was all the content. We have just a few minutes left for Q&A. So on my Q&A slide, I'll just provide some links if you want more information. We will have this session, I think hopefully the recording worked here. We will have this session available and recorded. Reach out to us if you want to get a copy of the presentation. We've got lots of white papers, great free educational content. Stop by our booth. We're in the first booth on the first floor in the first row, 204. So Adam's walking around with a microphone here if there are any questions.
Hi, thank you. That was really good.
Thank you.
Question on the customer data part. As you go forward, you got the marketplace trying to own the customer, therefore the data, and then you got the individual manufacturers trying to own the data. How do you see that playing out as more and more marketplaces happen?
I swear that was not a staged question. I do actually have a couple slides on that. Traditional retailers, you have this flow. I'm gonna have to go through this real quick, where the manufacturer sells to the retailer. They both make a profit there in traditional retailer, and everybody makes some money in this supply chain, but the manufacturer does not get the data in this case. So the brand or the manufacturer does not get the data there. So in the D2C model, if some manufacturers go direct to consumer D2C without including the seller is still going to buy some inventory because they may still have some physical customers, but more and more customers are going to start buying direct from the brand D2C because maybe they get faster inventory, they like the brand, they get better pricing, and that way the brand gets the data, but the retailer does not get that data. The retailer does not get the customer. The retailer is going to essentially stop buying from that brand eventually. So that's the channel conflict issue with traditional e-commerce model of D2C. Marketplaces offer an interesting new model, which is similar to what AB InBev just talked about on the stage an hour ago. So you still have the selling of goods from the distributor, the manufacturer, the CPG brand to the retailer. There's a profit being made in that process. The customer can purchase from the marketplace, like in the case of AB InBev, buying from the beer delivery, cold beer delivery in other markets. The brand gets the data. They get an order. The order goes to the local retailer. The retailer fulfills the order to the customer. The retailer gets data. The customer gets the goods. Everybody's happy in this equation. So no channel conflict, leveraging the marketplace model. So that's a very common question. That's why I had that at the end, but.
So you talked very briefly about SEO, search engine optimization. So if I have a brand with a marketplace, or I'm a retailer with a marketplace, if my sellers sell on my marketplace and other marketplaces, do I have to be concerned about my content being exactly the same as all these other marketplaces and potentially having a duplicate content penalty because of that?
No, that actually, in a lot of cases, I'm not an SEO expert, but a lot of cases that actually can help drive the value of the brand. It oftentimes is good to stay consistent, and it depends on the business model. Some companies want to have consistent information, consistent pricing. A lot of times, like in manufacturers to like parts suppliers, and they want to have the same consistent information, even consistent pricing. They set the price, and the different retailers honor that same price to avoid driving the cost of their goods down. So for the operator, it's good to have more data, more SKUs, more organic SEO, and having to do less spend for SEM. For the brand, the more their brand is out there on multiple websites and more popular out on the website, on the internet in general, the better it is. Again, I'm not an SEO expert, so it's not my domain of expertise, but that's my understanding of it.
Yeah. Question around supply chain. So with limited inventory that each brand has, does this change within the next 2 years with how brands are using marketplaces?
It actually has been a great supply chain resiliency solution. So when nobody could buy masks a year ago, a lot of people went to the marketplace of Etsy, and they're buying homemade masks from thousands of different suppliers, and their market share and their revenue GMV shot way up. Very successful for Etsy because they were a more resilient supply chain solution with thousands of sources instead of just waiting for that one container ship stuck outside of LA. So it does provide more supply chain resiliency. Did I answer your question?
It does provide resiliency, but let's say a brand has limited inventory to begin with, right? Let's say they're selling on their DTC site. It'll go to off-price or Amazon.com or Walmart.com. It's like you rather promote your own DTC site, right? So in the next years, while I'm waiting for the next season to launch, our brand basically saying, I'll just focus on the inventory on my DTC site versus distributing it through all these marketplaces, which has been traditionally lucrative, but to build their own DTC site, it might take away from that.
Okay, I understand the question. So will sharing inventory with third-party sellers hurt the brand manufacturer or the distributor. So it can be done multiple ways. So I mentioned that on those marketplaces, there can be resellers selling from the distributor, resellers getting from the distributor, the manufacturer or the distributor selling directly on those marketplaces as well. So it's oftentimes a combination of those where some brands may or may not opt to sell directly on the marketplaces due to channel conflict issues. So I think it's kind of a case-by-case basis based on the category and the seasonality of the product. So there are probably a lot of different factors that go into answering that. Good question, though. Very good question. I think we are at our time here. Thank you very much. Appreciate you guys attending. Thank you.